My son-in-law didn't say a word when his mother handed my daughter a box wrapped in silver paper at the rehearsal dinner. He just smiled. That smile told me everything I needed to know, and I should have acted right then, but I didn't. I told myself I was reading too much into it. I told myself I'd raised a strong girl. I told myself it would be fine. I was wrong about all of it. My daughter's name is Lena. She's 32 years old, and she has her mother's eyes, steady, brown, the kind that don't look away when things get hard. Her mother passed 11 years ago, breast cancer. Lena was 21, finishing her junior year at Ohio State, and she came home and took care of things without being asked. She sat with her mother through the treatments, drove her to Columbus for the appointments, slept in the recliner next to her hospital bed for the last 3 weeks. I wanted to be the one doing those things. But Lena got there first, every time, like she'd been preparing her whole life to hold the world steady when it started to shake. After we lost her mother, it was just the two of us. We figured out dinners together. We learned to talk about things neither of us had ever talked about before. I retired from 31 years in commercial insurance 2 years later and picked up woodworking, mostly to keep my hands busy. Lena would come home on weekends and sit in the garage and talk to me while I sanded things. We were okay. We were more than okay. She met him 3 years ago. His name is Griffin. He's handsome in a way that photographs well. Square jaw, good posture, the kind of guy who gets called distinguished before he's earned it. He works in finance, or at least that's what he calls it. His family has money going back a few generations, and somewhere along the way they started confusing having money with being better than people who didn't. His mother's name is Sylvia. She runs the family like a corporation, with a board of directors that consists entirely of herself. His father, a quiet man named Randall, has perfected the art of looking just past you when she speaks, like he's watching something more interesting on a screen behind your head. He's been doing it so long I don't think he notices anymore. The first time I met them was at a dinner at their home in Westerville, the kind of house that has a dining room nobody eats in and furniture that looks expensive because it is. Sylvia shook my hand at the door and said, "We've heard so much about you," in a tone that made it clear she hadn't wanted to. She had Lena's coat off before I could offer to take it, hung it in the closet herself, said something to Lena about the cut not being quite right for her shape. Lena laughed it off. I watched her laugh it off. That worried me more than the comment did. Over dinner, Sylvia asked Lena what her 5-year plan was. Lena talked about her work. She manages operations for a mid-sized logistics company. Good salary, good benefits. People respect her there. Sylvia listened with an expression that was technically attentive and said, "That's wonderful for now." Then she turned to talk to Griffin about something else. I drove home that night, thinking about my wife, thinking about what she would have said in the car on the way back. Probably something like, "She's threatened by her." My wife had a gift for naming things clearly. I didn't have that gift. I had worry and no words for it, which is a bad combination. The engagement happened 8 months later. Griffin proposed at a restaurant downtown. Good restaurant, nice gesture. Lena called me from the parking lot after, and her voice was so full I had to sit down. I was happy for her. I was genuinely happy. And underneath it, steady as a low hum, was that worry I couldn't name. The wedding planning started, and so did Sylvia. She had opinions about the venue, the invitations, the flowers, the seating chart. She had opinions about Lena's dress, not suggestions, opinions delivered like findings from an expert panel. Lena accommodated most of them because she is at her core a person who tries to make peace. I've always loved that about her. I've also always been afraid of what it costs her. About 6 months before the wedding, I had a conversation with my younger brother Alan, who lives outside Atlanta and has the particular wisdom of someone who's been through 2 divorces and come out of it without bitterness. We were on the phone late, and I told him what I was seeing. I told him about Sylvia, about Griffin's silence when his mother spoke, about the way Lena had started qualifying things. Sylvia thinks, and Griffin's family usually. And I don't want to make a big deal of it. Alan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "What are you going to do about it?" I said I didn't know what I could do. He said, "You can make sure she has a way out, not because she'll need it, but because knowing it's there changes everything." I thought about that for a long time after we hung up. I thought about it in the garage, sanding a side table I was building for no particular reason. I thought about the house. When my wife and I bought our place on Clover Mill Road 34 years ago, We paid $82,000 for it. It needed work, and we did the work ourselves, mostly on weekends, with bad tools and YouTube videos before YouTube existed. It was worth considerably more now. I'd paid it off years ago and had no intention of selling. But I'd also been thinking, for some time, about what would happen to it when I was gone, and whether there was a smarter thing to do with it than leave it to chance. I called my attorney, a woman named Barbara, who has handled my affairs for 15 years and has never once softened a hard truth to spare my feelings. I told her what I was thinking. She walked me through the options. We talked about what could be done and what needed to be in place to make it solid. It took 4 months and 3 separate appointments. But by the time October came around, I had what I needed. The rehearsal dinner was a Friday night at a private room at a restaurant. Sylvia had selected in Dublin white tablecloths, low lighting, a bartender who kept refilling glasses before they were empty. Lena was glowing. She was wearing a blue dress, her dark hair down, and when she came across the room to hug me, I held on for a second longer than usual. About halfway through the evening, Sylvia stood up and announced that she had a gift for Lena, a welcome gift, she called it. Something to help her settle into her new life. She handed Lena a flat box, the kind you'd wrap a scarf in, silver paper, white ribbon. Lena opened it. Inside was an apron, a kitchen apron, the thick canvas kind, with a small embroidered logo in the corner, and beneath it, folded neatly, what I can only describe as a domestic uniform. The type of thing that comes in a set, with matching trim, the kind you'd see in a catalogue advertising household staff products. There was a moment of silence, one of those silences that has a shape to it. Then Griffin laughed. It wasn't a big laugh. It was worse than that. It was a comfortable laugh, the laugh of someone who'd expected this and found it funny. He said, "You're going to need that. Mom runs a tight ship." He glanced at Lena with an expression I can only describe as satisfied. Lena's face did something complicated. She smoothed it out quickly. Too quickly. She said, "Oh, thank you, Sylvia," and set the box on the table. I watched her hands. She pressed them flat on the tablecloth. I looked across the table at Randall. He was looking just past someone's shoulder at a point on the wall. I excused myself and went to the men's room and stood at the sink for about 2 minutes. I looked at my own face in the mirror. 64 years old, grey at the temples, reading glasses in my shirt pocket. I thought about my wife. I thought about what she would have done. She would not have gone to the men's room. She would have said something right there at the table, something that landed softly and cut deep. I went back to the table. I said nothing. I stayed through the dinner. I drove home. And at 11:30 that night, I called Alan. "It's happening faster than I thought," I said. "You ready?" he said. I told him I was. The wedding was on a Saturday in October. Lena was married in a church in the suburb where Griffin's family had attended for 3 generations. There were 220 people there, most of them on his side. My people were 11, my brother and his wife, Lena's 2 closest friends from college, a handful of cousins who'd made the drive from Dayton. She was beautiful. I walked her down the aisle, and when we got to the front, she squeezed my hand so hard I felt it in my elbow. I didn't let go until I had to. The reception was at a venue outside the city, a converted farmhouse with string lights and a catering team, and a bar that opened the moment the ceremony ended. Sylvia had planned most of it. She was wearing a dress in ivory, not quite white but close enough to make a statement, and she greeted guests at the entrance like she was hosting. I was seated at a table near the back with my brother and the cousins. A good seat, actually. Clear view of the room close to the bar. About 40 minutes into the reception, Sylvia clinked her glass and said she had a few words. The room quieted. She talked about Griffin, about what a wonderful man he was, about how proud she was. Then she turned to Lena with a smile that didn't reach her eyes and said that she hoped Lena would take her new role seriously, that a marriage was built on a foundation of home and family, and that she was confident Lena would learn what that meant in time. Then she picked up a bag from under her chair. She walked it over to Lena's place at the head table. She set it down in front of her. She said, "A little something from us, for your new home." Lena opened it. She was smiling because it was her wedding day, and she had practiced smiling through things. She pulled out the tissue paper. She reached in, she pulled out the apron, the same one from the rehearsal dinner, or an identical one. And beneath it, wrapped in more tissue, another set of the matching domestic uniform, folded and pressed and presented like something to be proud of. And Griffin, he was watching Lena's face, and he laughed again. and he said to the table, to no one in particular, "Perfect, she's going to be great at this." Lena set everything down carefully. Her jaw was tight. I could see it from where I was sitting, across the room. Her two friends exchanged a look. Nobody at the head table said anything. I picked up my glass. I stood up. I don't have a big voice. I never did. But the room was quiet enough, and I said, "Lena, would you do me a favour and open the gift I brought? The one I set by your seat." She looked at me. Something shifted in her expression. She reached beside her chair and picked up a flat manila envelope, the kind lawyers use, with a metal clasp. I had placed it there before the ceremony. I'd told the venue coordinator it was a card, which it was, in part. She looked at me again, and I nodded, and she opened the clasp. Inside was a cover letter from Barbara, my attorney, summarising what was enclosed and what it meant, and beneath it, the documentation on the property at Clover Mill Road, transferred entirely into Lena's name, through an irrevocable trust, structured to remain solely hers, regardless of her marital status. Her name only, protected by a provision my attorneys had insisted on, and that I had been glad to include. No joint ownership. No pathway for any other party to claim it. Hers alone. She read the cover letter. Then she kept reading. The table was quiet. Her eyes moved across the page slowly. I watched her face change. The careful blankness she'd been holding cracked open, and what came through was something I hadn't seen in a long time. Not happiness exactly. Something more like relief. The deep, structural kind that you feel in your chest when something you didn't know was holding you finally lets go. Her voice when she spoke was not steady. She said, "Dad." I said, "Read it out loud." She did. Not all of it, just the key parts, her voice getting quieter as she went. The room was silent in a different way now. The 220 people at that reception had been talking and clinking glasses and not paying attention. But people were paying attention now. I looked at Griffin. His smile had changed character. It was still on his face, but it had gone stiff, the way a smile shows when the brain behind it is working fast. I looked at Sylvia. She was looking at the envelope in Lena's hands with an expression I can only describe as recalculation. Lena finished reading. She set the papers down and pressed both hands flat on the table, same as she'd done at the rehearsal dinner, but differently this time, like she was feeling the surface of something solid. She looked up at me and she said, "You gave me the house." I said, "I gave you options." She started to cry. Not the delicate kind, the real kind, where you try to stop and you can't, where your shoulders shake, and the sound that comes out is the sound of something you've been holding for a long time. Her friends were up in 30 seconds, arms around her. A few guests shifted in their chairs. Someone started clapping. I don't know who, one of my cousins maybe, and a few others joined in, tentatively, then less tentatively. Griffin stood up. He said, This is a lot for a wedding reception, isn't it?" He said it with a kind of forced lightness, looking around for support, the way people do when they're trying to reframe something that has already happened. Nobody laughed. Sylvia put her glass down with a controlled precision that told me she was furious. Randall was looking at the wall. My brother Alan, from across the room, caught my eye and raised his glass toward me, just slightly. The rest of the evening went the way these things go when the balance of something has shifted, and everyone can feel it. Conversations were quieter. The toasts that came after were careful. Griffin made a speech that was fine, the words of a man performing confidence. Lena danced with her friends and laughed at something. One of them said, when she came to find me later in the evening, she sat down beside me and took my hand. She said, "How long have you been planning this?" I said, "Since April." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "You didn't say anything." I said, "I wanted you to make your own choices. I just wanted to make sure you knew you had them." She put her head on my shoulder. She's 32 years old, and she put her head on my shoulder the way she did when she was 8, and we'd watch baseball games on the couch on Sunday afternoons. I sat very still. I didn't want to disturb it. The marriage lasted 14 months. I'm not going to say I told her so, because I never did and I never will. Lena made her own decisions, including the one to leave, which was hers and hers alone. She filed the paperwork in December, and Griffin did not contest the property. Legally, there was nothing to contest. Barbara had been thorough. Lena moved into the house on Clover Mill Road in January. She painted the kitchen a shade of green she'd always liked, the colour of old glass. She got a dog, a big brown mutt named Biscuit, who has claimed my recliner in the garage as his personal territory. She came over on Sundays and we watched baseball again, The three of us, me and Lena and the dog, the same couch, the same afternoon light coming through the window over the sink. One Sunday in the spring she said to me without looking up from the game, "What made you decide to do it? The property, I mean. What made you actually do it?" I thought about how to answer that. I thought about my brother's voice on the phone, asking me what I was going to do about it. I thought about my wife, about her eyes, about the way she named things. I said, "Your mother would have known what to say in the moment. She would have stood up at that table and said exactly the right thing." I paused. I never had that, so I had to find another way to say it. Lena looked at me then. She didn't say anything for a little while. Then she said, "You said it." The dog shifted on the recliner. The announcer said something about a double play. Outside, the yard was the deep green of late April, the maples coming back, and the afternoon was long and unhurried, and we sat there together, my daughter and I, while the light moved slowly across the floor.